from Relevance and Impact. My name is Liisa Laakso. I'm a senior researcher at the Nordic Africa Institute, and I have the pleasure to open this conference and ask our organizers, representatives of our organizers, to give their welcome address. Professor Etienne Ehile, Secretary General of Association of African Universities, Dr. Godwin Murunga, Executive Secretary of CODESRIA, and Victor Adetula, Research Director from the Nordic Africa Institute. So, please.
Thank you, Lisa. The Research Director, Nordic Africa Institute, the Executive Secretary of the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, CODESRIA, institutional heads, the media, invited participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to you all, especially to those who are traveling to Ghana for the first time. To my fellow colleagues here in Accra, please join me in giving our guest the most cordial of welcomes. I say in the local Accra parlance, Akwaba, as I express my delight to host you at the Secretariat of the Association of African Universities here in Accra, Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, the Association of African Universities is a membership organization with 400 plus universities and higher education institutions as members spread across the whole of Africa. Since 2018, we have established 2 Africa regional offices in Sudan and Egypt to serve our members in East Africa and North Africa, respectively. Earlier this month, we inaugurated our North America office to tap into and draw the academic diaspora closer to this continent to help our educational institutions. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I am particularly enthused by the theme for this meeting, which is Political Science Discipline in Africa, Freedom, Relevance, and Impact. The diversity of the African continent, partitioned along colonial boundaries and on linguistic divides, with huge natural resources, and above all, a people with an Ubuntu spirit, should guide the development of our educational programs towards attaining the target of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena under Africa Union's Agenda 2063. Indeed, our struggle as African has been towards the integration of political freedoms and economic emancipation. And for this, higher education plays a pivotal role. Now, African states are gradually recovering, albeit slowly, from a point of internal conflicts, poverty, and malnutrition towards increased participation and the rule of law. But there are times when I have questioned the educational system. Thus, what do we want as African academics? Why do we turn out graduates who enter public life to rather compound existing problems instead of helping solve them? And in all these, what roles the political science and its study play in developing a citizenry imbibed with the values of accountability, selfishness, hard work, and respect for self, others, and the ecosystem in which we live in. Mr. Chair, education is the panacea to most of our societal eyes, and as we proceed with this gathering of great minds, let us find this Accra meeting as a unique convergence of some of Africa's trusted and illustrious political scientists, carving a trajectory that feeds into meeting the African Union's Agenda 2063 goal under the broader title, The Africa We Want. On this note, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, let me express my personal gratitude and that of the AAU to the Nordic African Institute for organizing this conference. I wish to welcome you all once again to this event, and may we have the best of deliberations. Thank you.
Good morning. Unless you respond, I'm not proceeding. The meeting is over. Good morning. Yeah, that sounds like something, unless you are not happy to be here. My name is Godwin Murunga, Executive Secretary of CODESRIA, the Executive Secretary General of the AAU, Research Director, Nordic Africa Institute, the organizers of the conference, ladies and gentlemen. Mine is really very brief. First, to welcome you to this meeting that is jointly organized by our three organizations, and to thank both Lisa and her team for initiating the idea that has led to this particular meeting. I am particularly happy that the Nordic Africa Institute decided to loop in CODESRIA into the organization of this particular meeting. And perhaps my own pleasure for this stems from two key points. The first one of which is that CODESRIA and the Nordic Africa Institute have enjoyed a history, actually a long history, of partnership over the years, represented in the one instance around several key meetings that the two organizations have been involved in, but also by the fact that repeatedly a good number of CODESRIA members have found their way to Dakar via Uppsala. Which is indeed a reflection of how much the two organizations have a history of shared interest in the study of Africa. I am also particularly happy that we are holding this meeting at the AAU, mainly because CODESRIA and the AAU do in fact have a similar history of mutual interest in the dynamics of higher education on the continent in the first instance, but also globally. And that repeatedly members of CODESRIA and members of the African Association of Universities have in fact found their way to each other either through Dakar or through Accra, as it happens. And it cannot go without saying that a former Secretary General of the AAU is in fact also a former president of CODESRIA, Professor Akila Pasoya, whom we all do know. So there is in fact a mutuality that exists between our different organizations, and it would not have been any better for me on behalf of CODESRIA and on behalf of the community of scholarship in CODESRIA to easily sign on to co-organizing this meeting and participating in it as I have. Of course, I'm not here alone. I'm here with my colleague who heads the research program at CODESRIA, Dr. Ato Onoma, who is sitting right there. I think you have to indicate that you are present. Yeah, Ato is himself a political scientist. So if there are any difficult political science questions raised to me, I will definitely be handing them over to him for more educated answers. As I mentioned, CODESRIA does attach value to this partnership for both intellectual reasons, but also for institutional reasons, partly because the three organizations here share the need to advance knowledge on the continent, but also to make sure that the knowledge workers, if you will, are able to do it in a context that allows them to do it easily. And it's important for me that this is a gathering around political science. It's important for me, mainly because a significant number of CODESRIA members are political scientists. A significant number. You might not know because what we do to them in CODESRIA is to force them to adopt an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach to knowledge production on the continent. Informing political science via history, for instance, that consciousness that political developments do in fact operate within specific contexts. In the last several years in CODESRIA, we've faced an even bigger challenge that the Association of African Political Science is either moribund or dead, right? And precisely because of that, we experience more demand on us as CODESRIA because a significant number of other organizations, just like the African Association of Political Science, are no longer in operation. And so part of my hidden desire to be here today is to actually provoke the question, is it fair for a continent like Africa to continue as though we do not need that Association of African Political Scientists? This is really the reason why I felt that it's important to come to this meeting and to provoke our colleagues, the political scientists in the room, to begin to think more actively about resuscitating that organization. And in doing so, I was aware that there are initial initiatives driven by colleagues in South Africa through the South African Political Science Organization to begin a conversation that is continent-wide towards resuscitating the African Political Science Association. I think that the thanks we owe to the Nordic Africa Institute in general and to Lisa in particular, that this conference can actually begin to provide the seeds for a serious engagement around what are the core issues within political science as a discipline. How is it engaging other disciplines in generating knowledge about Africa? And to what is the role of individual political scientists in the current developments on the continent? And what is the role of the general community of social science and humanities scholars in supporting political scientists to produce knowledge that actually helps us advance the cause of the continental development? So those two things are driving my interest here, and my desire is to listen carefully, but to nudge and push on behalf of CODESRIA that the association has to be reactivated. And I wanted to make it as an open statement that as part of our mandate in CODESRIA, we are here to encourage the development of organizations that would support the social sciences and humanities on the continent. And we want to be a part of supporting the resuscitation, not just of the African Association of Political Science, but also the African Association of Historians and many other organizations that need to rise up. Because if we do, I will not anymore be a lone voice in advancing and inserting the African voice in global debates around any of the developments that we have. And so I'm looking at all of you and saying that we hope that we can hear positive news. We don't want to influence the direction, but we want to be there as pillars that are useful in supporting the emergence, growth, and development of the association. Because this is what we owe to those ones who have contributed to knowledge in political science. As I was preparing these remarks this morning, I asked myself the question, what would Abdurrauf Mustafa say the discipline of political science is doing today? And I singled him out because in the last days of his life, he actually did a very useful chapter in a book edited by Paul Tiambezeleza on political science and discipline, tracking the itinerary of knowledge production in the discipline. I think we need to update that chapter. And I think this conference helps us to begin to think of how to update that chapter. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much, Lisa, for organizing this meeting. And I wish you the very best in the deliberations going forward. Thank you.
The Executive Secretary of Association of Africa University, Professor Etienne Ehile, my own brother and co-traveler, Godwin Murunga, Executive Secretary, CODESRIA, ladies and gentlemen, I think I should start with a disclosure. I train as a political scientist, but I don't know what I have become now. I think I have become a political scientist that have benefited from tutelage under CODESRIA as an umbrella institution that has facilitated our training to become what I can justly call well-rounded social scientist that is equipped with all it takes to investigate those hidden themes that up till now we're still struggling to get them for attention. After that disclosure, I think my job is very simple. I'm representing the director of the Nordic Africa Institute, who for very, very compelling reason has to delay her takeoff. So later in the day, she will be joining us here because we look forward not only deepening that hidden agenda like Godwin said, but going beyond that. On behalf of the Nordic Africa Institute, all of us, and indeed our co-organizer, we want to welcome you again. It's un-African for me to say welcome the third time, because I know that after the first, second breaking of the cola, especially by our institutions that are right in Africa here, I can only footnote what has been said. But be that as it may, we're very, very happy that we are in a way associated with the growing effort to support the theme of our gathering here, which is long due for enlightening support across the continent and even beyond. And for Nordic Africa Institute that has been on ground since 1962, it's a big step for us that, again, we are visible in this intellectual engagement, and we look forward to a very interactive session on that. Having said that, I want to add to what has been said that our relationship with CODESRIA is not today. We've been in the trenches together for a very long time. And I think Godwin has said it, so many of us at different times has passed through the Nordic Africa Institute, including himself. Including himself. So that we are very happy. I think when Godwin was appointed, I remember that day at the floor of Nordic Africa Institute, we all jumped out and we celebrated, and we quickly put it on our website. Congratulations once again. And of course, the lot of Bayo, Ebrimaso, and so many of us continue to sustain that relationship. And our new partner in the Association of Africa, so we look to a very long and enduring relationship with this. And already, the theme of higher education in Africa has started to regain attention among our colleagues. I think if not for this meeting, we were to have a group discussion around that theme this week. And I know by the time we go back, we're going to go back with more energy to discuss. Who knows, in a few weeks' time, we may be talking to you on how to develop a more elaborate program around the theme of higher education. And for me and the Institute itself, Ghana is not new. In the past 24 months, we've come around here repeatedly, and by extension, West Africa. We were here in Ghana we organized a policy dialogue on the future of EU-Africa relationship, and that has been very, very useful for our stakeholders. Not too long ago, we were in Abidjan, where we engaged with the African Development Bank on extractive industry. And again, and I remember that at that meeting, we also mentioned CODESRIA, that it would be very good for us to extend this to involve CODESRIA. That's to talk about Ghana. And in Nigeria, we've been there several times. We've been in Uganda, Makerere University, where we collaborated on our REX, Regional Economic Community and Peace Building in Africa. We were in Rabat, Morocco, where we treated the same theme. We were in Cape Town in South Africa, and we're in Nigeria, in Abuja, where we treated the theme of regional economic community and peace building in Africa. Now, what do we do at NI? From what I've said, you can figure out that we research and policy organization, and we're funded by the Nordic countries. And of course, the benefit of our work is beyond the Nordic. We also recognize critical stakeholders in Africa. For the purpose of research, currently we are dealing with about 4 thematic areas, which we know very, very central to development discourse in Africa: issue of conflicts and democratic transformation, mobility and migration in Africa, inclusive growth and poverty. Of course, we have gender equality and human rights. Regardless of this categorization, we also emphasize and underscore cross-cutting theme. So our activity by no way limited to this thematic area. We provide opportunity for new initiatives like that I've just mentioned about higher education. And of course, we're also looking at the issue of health. And we allow people to come up, even when you have your resources and you have very new ideas that are not within this thematic focal area. We have a very rich library which people have come to testify is one of the best in Europe, including books produced on the continent, because researchers have responsibility when they go out to interact with colleagues like this to get books back home to Uppsala. So you'll be surprised. I think there was an African scholar who came about a few months ago and was shocked that the book that was launched, so to speak, within 2 months already in our library. And so all we just need to do is to, even colleagues in a network like this, send us that, look, you have published a book. We are not asking you to give us complimentary copy, but if you do, we will accept. We go in search for that book so that people who come for 3 months stay, for 6 months stay. Our scholarship program can also benefit. May I also use this opportunity to say we have another program, which is the Claude Ake. We all know who Claude Ake was, the foremost leading African political scientist. We have a Claude Ake visiting professorship, which is for about 3 months, and that has been for years. I happen to be one of them, and I can proudly announce that Professor Ekwesa Osage, please can you stand up for recognition? Is our current Claude Ake chair, which in a way is symbolic in terms of our identification with political science discipline in Africa. I thought we would receive a applaud for that. Don't mind me, don't mind me. I'm not doing any marketing, but I think I should underscore that point. But for this particular platform, what are our expectations? I mean, it's just to add to what has been said. We do believe that this is not going to be a one-off interaction or engagement. We want to use this opportunity not only to revive political science. For us at the Nordic Africa Institute, we want to use it to go back to our old CODESRIA partner and our new one and discuss how do we think about long-term engagements, both around the theme of the relevance of social science, humanities scholarship in Africa in a way that key into development strategy for the continent. I think this is very, very important. And we do expect that out of this interaction, there will be growing networks, there will be new ideas that we can go back home and structure out and re-engage ourselves. Let me stop here so that I do not take our time. Once again, on behalf of all of us from the Nordic Africa Institute, and I want to recognize that in addition to Lisa, Kesa, there's Diana there, and of course Professor Ehosa. So it's a whole team of about 8 of us that has come to look at the role of political science, and by extension, social science and humanity scholarship in Africa. And lastly, to underscore the point that the theme is of universal as well as specific relevance to today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Etienne Ehile, Dr. Godwin Murunga, and Professor Victor Adetula. So just to give an introduction to the program, it has been a great pleasure to look at all the abstracts we received and the topics and approaches represented by the scholars we were able to invite to our conference. And for me personally, this is also a project to update my own knowledge on politics and research on political science in Africa. I have worked for a while in university administration, and now when I'm doing field work, I'm meeting colleagues who are surprised to see me, because last time they read something I produced, that was the time when they were students. So that's my personal interest. But let me say something about the topic, African politics. Africa is still politically very heterogeneous and most rapidly changing continent. The early 1990s, when I started to do research on African politics, was a time of a wave of democratization, which was particularly comprehensive, at least on the surface in Africa. It affected both socialist and market-oriented countries. Before 1990, the assessments are that only about 5 sub-Saharan African countries could be regarded as implementing a multi-party system where opposition parties were able to organize. Only 5 years later, this number had risen to almost 40. North Africa was affected by the 2011 Arab Spring, but the opportunities of opposition to take part in electoral competition in the African continent show only partial improvement today. Democracy, of course, is much more than multi-party competition, but yet it is an important example where political science, both as critics and as expertise, has relevance. The mere introduction and implementation of legislation allowing political competition, popular participation, requires information and understanding much beyond common knowledge, and most importantly, covering local conditions. Electoral reforms cannot be realized overnight. They need to be monitored, assessed, adjusted, while skills, advice, and criticism based on the expertise of other societies or other continents is hardly enough. And it seems evident that the ability of local scholars to participate in political discussions can contribute not only to democratic decision-making, but also to the quality and resilience of democratic institutions and their design. So our assumption is that freedom to develop and disseminate knowledge and capacities to produce knowledge through research and education on the functioning form and content of democracy in Africa can explicitly sustain its institutions and prevent major setbacks. But research work, of course, requires resources and it takes time, not to speak about research training and higher education. So having impact requires role in public discussion and interaction with policymakers. And just about these resources and time, I just recently met a professor from Zimbabwe, Midlands University from Kweru, and she said that they had made an agreement with the Teachers Association and the university that they need to work only 2 days per week. This is because with their salary they can't afford working for 5 days a week. They can't even afford to come to the offices. So in some places the question of resources is so fundamental. But Africa is interesting in terms of political science topics, much beyond the continent. I think that for the last 25 years, the rules and rationale of political competition, which are very fundamental questions in our discipline, have been in the center of the political discussions here, like in no other continent. Constitutional coups, coup d'etats, extending the tenure and powers of the executive, frequency of electoral violence are just examples of the vulnerability of political competition in Africa. And I think also practical, concrete examples of challenges where the academics could have a say. This is not to deny the importance of these very same questions elsewhere and the global crisis of democracy or liberal democracy eroded by populism and autocratization, which has been observed, for instance, by the recent analysis of the varieties of democracy database and project. Let me also elaborate the general value of our discussions from a personal perspective. Before coming back to research work in the beginning of this year at the Nordic Africa Institute, I served 10 years in academic leadership positions in my home country in Finland. And let me say that I'm not exacerbating if I say that the issue of relevance and impact of research and education had to be addressed in one way or another almost every day. One reason, of course, is purely rhetoric, and it relates to the new management culture in the public sector, affecting also universities. But it also had, or it also has to do with university funding and research funding. For example, in social sciences, we started to speak about social innovations, which of course exist, but which leaves quite a lot outside of the focus. But without such very concrete examples giving direct benefits to taxpayers or private companies funding research, it became increasingly difficult to take part in the discussions to defend the role of social sciences. So whether we like it or not, we have to clarify the multiple aspects of the relevance and impact of our disciplines, political science among them. And this, I think, is a very concrete issue for the future of our discipline, not only in Africa and the Nordic countries, but worldwide. It is my belief that by looking at the relationship between disciplinary knowledge and politics, we can find also new dynamics that are valid beyond Africa. So together with CODESRIA and Association of African Universities, with whom I was able to meet with Godwin and Professors Jonathan and Etienne in Stockholm last May when we started to plan this conference. We wanted to invite scholars who are representing different angles and experiences of the space and role of political science in Africa. And we are so happy that so many of you could come. We have divided the program into roundtables and sessions. There will be 2 roundtables. First one today about the harmonization of political science degree programs, which of course is essential for student and teachers' mobility and also essential for the quality of education in Africa. And the other roundtable, precisely of the topic Godwin already spoke about the African networking of political scientists. That will take place tomorrow. Both, I think, are very, very important roundtables, and I hope that we will have ideas how to go forward in a very concrete way. Then we have sessions. I just give the topics on the profile of the discipline of political science. Today, what is studied and thought about political systems, administration, international relations, and political economy in Africa. Then we have 2 sessions on the role of political scientists, representation, and also the discussion on decolonization of the discipline. This is divided to 2. The other part is taking place tomorrow. Then we have a session of sub-disciplines in political science, including international politics, policy studies. And 4th session tomorrow will be about academic freedom and the role of political scientists. And then session number 5 on democratization and the relevance of political science, interaction with the policymakers, and session number 6, which is organized together with the Miasa Institute at the University of Ghana, bringing institutions back in the study of African politics. Saturday morning, I hope that you can still attend our discussion summarizing the whole conference and deciding about the next steps. Our wish really is that we will not only map the state of political science in Africa with empirical evidence and conceptual clarifications today, but that we could also track the future trends. Today we will take a group photo, and in the evening we have a conference dinner at Mensvik Hotel, where you all are most welcome. For practicalities, if there is anything, you can turn to myself or to Kaisa Halberg, who is welcoming us at the door today, and who is halfly Ghanaian, I would say, and almost a local, although now working at our institute, about which we are very happy. And then we have a volunteer assistant, Filani Dalmini, who is not. Okay, there you are. You can ask assistance from Filani also if there is anything you need. And I sincerely want to thank Association of African University for hospitality and for providing this nice venue for us, and CODESRIA for all practical organizations, and the staff, many people, both in CODESRIA, AAU, and at our own institute. And now we can proceed directly to roundtable number 1, where I will give the chair to Professor Etienne Ehile. Because of some last-minute adjustments, maybe we could take session number 1 first on political science in Africa, profile of the discipline, because Dr. Johannes from African Union has not yet arrived. Yeah. So.
See if everybody's here from session 1.
If I will give to you.
So maybe just roll call to see if we have everybody here for session 1, and if you're comfortable setting the conference ball in rolling. So do we have Dr. Afolabi here? Yes, good. I am here. Dr. Mate is here, and I saw Shadrach Nasongo as well. Good, and Ato Onoma is here. Shall we start? And then we probably have no delays, then we can just move the round table around. So then I'll ask those who I just called to please come forward if you want to sit here, or if you have presentations, you can share them with Pilani, who's sitting over there. Maybe we take 5 minutes. If somebody needs to use the washrooms, they're just across the hall over there to set up. Let's take 5 minutes to set up, and then we'll start with session 1. Thank you.